What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Cornerstone Gundog Academy podcast. I'm Barton Ramsey, one of the founders of Cornerstone, and I'm back to you with episode 2 of 2 on post-season training, tuning up your dog after duck season ends. Still a little bit bitter that hunting season is over, but I've been out with my dogs a couple times now, having lots of fun. Last episode of the podcast, we talked about a couple things that are fairly common that I think a lot of us will see, especially with young dogs during their first or even second season, or dogs that just might be a little out of shape or haven't been worked as much. We talked about breaking. We talked about dropping birds. We talked about switching and how to fix those. So if you missed that, go back and check out the previous episode. But on this episode, I want to talk about quickly just a few of the more advanced things that maybe you trained for, and then when you got out there for the season, the dog just didn't live up to the standard that you hoped for. First one, whistle stops. I think sometimes you get out in the hunting field, you shoot a lot of birds, and the excitement level is really high, and I tell people all the time, the brake pads start to wear down. The dog just doesn't stop quite as abruptly as you hoped for. And I truly think in most instances, this is a generalization issue or not getting your dog to a state of fluency with whistle stops. So yeah, they stop in training when they understand the environment and the expectation, but when you get them in a more excitable environment in a hunt, the whistle stops tend to go away or at least diminish a little bit. So it's normal. It happens. What you can do is go back and obviously run, blind retrieves with your dog in training. That's the obvious answer. You can go way back and run things like the Wally drill, whistle stop at play, but you're still going to have to, in some ways, replicate the excitement. So I would say use birds in your training. Use some diversion marks to get a little bit higher level of excitement out of your dog. And then, in particular, go back and run some pattern blinds. Pattern blinds are great. They're a great way to teach a dog. I'm going to recommend them twice in this video. But just really hone in on the communication with you and the dog. And in addition to just running simple pattern blinds, introduce some marks into your pattern blinds. This can be a great way to work on whistle stops. What do I mean by that? If you have a winger or a bird boy, set up your pattern blind, work your dog through the pattern blinds. This is something I usually do with all my dogs after the season anyway. And after you're confident that your dog's, running each of the 3 legs with confidence, start adding some marks in on the course. And if I would use dummies as the pattern blind and then throw birds as the marks. And so you might throw a mark just left of the left pattern blind and line the dog up on the pattern blind and send it. And obviously there's going to be suction for the dog to pull to that mark. And this is when you're going to work on your whistle stops. The dog has some excitement to go do something that's other than what you're telling it to do. So you're going to need to stop and redirect. And this is where you can get some great repetitions for the whistle stop. And if the dog does stop on the whistle, take your cast and make it to the pattern blind, then it gets the reward of the bird that fell as a mark. So really hone in on those. I would say another great thing you can do for whistle stops after the season is something you probably didn't even realize you were doing during the season, which is going too fast. And what you can do after the season is just slow down, slow everything way down. It is easy to get going fast, especially when you're on a hunt and people have expectations. All right, we got to get the birds back real fast. We got to get the dog back in. More birds are coming, and you just kind of go fast, and you let your dog get away with not stopping on some whistles. So slow everything way down. Concentrate on a long whistle stop. So blow that whistle, count to 4, 5, 6 Mississippi while the dog's looking back at you, and then cast the dog. All right. Another thing I see a lot with the advanced dogs is not taking a good line. You get the dog on a hunt, and the dog's been picking up lots of birds in the decoys, and now you need them to run just to the left of the decoys so that they can go on a long sailor, but the dog takes a line toward where something fell previously. Very common in hunting scenarios. And this is where, again, go back to pattern blinds, add those marks into the pattern blinds, and really focus on your cues and how you line your dog up. It's very, very important. And then secondly, you can go back and you can run the wagon wheel drill. I really love the wagon wheel drill. You can make it as far out as you want, make it difficult for the dog, especially if you have an advanced dog that's already, hunting. It's a great, great drill to go back and work on the communication with your dog. And in particular, you're going to use attrition in a wagon wheel and on a pattern blind. And so you're going to stop the dog if they take an incorrect line with a verbal stop, a no. You're going to recall the dog. That's all the punishment there is. You're just going to recall the dog, and then you're going to reline them up. Super simple, but if you repeat this process in training so that the dog understands, oh, shoot, I took a bad line, well, great. It's going to be more expected in the hunting space when you're in the field and you send the dog on the wrong line and bring them back. They understand what's being asked of them. Hey, I actually got to stay on the line that I was given. So that's my word for those two particular things. It's not stopping on the whistle, taking bad lines. Go back to some of those drills. A lot of times we just love running setups and we love running cold blinds. Marking setups and cold blinds are a lot of fun, but sometimes we got to go back to the basics and going back to some of those drills that are inside Cornerstone that are deeply embedded in our system, right? So pattern blinds, memories, circle memories, 180 memories, and then wagon wheel, walking baseball. Going back to these drills after the season, it can be so, so important to getting your dog properly tuned up and ready for next season. So aside from those two things, remember in the last podcast, I referenced, what are you going to work on? Well, hopefully you have some fresh things in your head from maybe mistakes the dog made or struggles the dog had during this past season. And that's the stuff you want to work on this year. You want to figure out, hey, what can we improve based on this year's hunting season? And we've covered a lot of different aspects of that. And the last one I want to talk about is marking. And I'm sure, I hope you had some excellent marks this season. There's nothing like sending a dog on a mark. I can think of one in particular this year that I had with a dog on a hunt on a pond, and it was probably just 80 yards, a little bit to the left, but it was an angle entry cutting through some icy water into some really tall cattails, out the other side of the cattails into like a kind of flooded, just grassy area. And out of sight, all dog, and I sent Moose, and he just absolutely drilled it. And I was sitting next to a buddy of mine, Aaron, who's also a dog trainer, who was like, man, that was a nice mark. And it's like, yeah, that's what we train for. But then I can think of other instances where I'm like, dang, he should have marked that. And maybe you have some of those. My encouragement to you would be, think back on like, all right, what was it about that mark that was difficult? What was it that messed my dog up? Was there some sticks and trees in the water in between me and the mark that got the dog hung up and they didn't want to push past that? Was there a hill? Was it just marking out beyond the decoys? Maybe the dog was just getting hung up in the decoys over and over again. Think back to some of those retrieves that were a little difficult for your dog, and then use your imagination, get creative, and figure out, how can I set up that type of mark using the grounds and the tools that I have. I can think of a particular mark I had in the timber where there was a brush pile, and I had to get my dog over the other side of the brush pile, and he didn't go that way on the mark. He let all of that push him far, far left. And then I couldn't even handle him over there. It was a very frustrating retrieve. It's one of those ones where you're like just pulling your hair out. And so I've already got a few areas picked out that I'm going to go run some similar marks this spring. And I'm just going to repeat them and help him understand, you have to push straight through that stuff, buddy. We can't go around that. Whatever that looks like for you this past year, maybe it was just not making the distance, get some big white dummies and go run some marks where the dog's going to see and pick up on the dummy from a long ways out, so you can push that distance and then work on a little more cover and then maybe a bird where they don't see the, you can increase the difficulty as your dog grows, but think about the types of marks and even the types of retrieves that really gave your dog a struggle this past year. That's what you need to push your setups toward, your single marks, your double marks, your blind retrieves, whatever you're working on with your dog. After you've done those drills I mentioned, when you start to run some setups, run them with intentionality. It's easy to just walk out and say, hey, we're just going to run 2 marks. Here they are. It takes a little bit more thought, a little bit more, introspection into your dog to say, you know what, we struggled with this. We struggled when there was a really bad crosswind. The dog got pushed in the wind really far downwind, and then we struggled to get back into the wind to find the bird. Perfect, right? Go back, set up some marks with a big crosswind. It's springtime. You're going to have big south winds for the next few months. Any warm day is going to have a south wind, especially if you're here in the South. Use that to your advantage. Just think through it, be intentional, and you will have a better dog next season than you had this season. And that really is the goal. Aside from just spending more time outside with your 4-legged companion. Doesn't get much better than that. Hope these tips have been helpful for you guys. We appreciate you listening. As always, reach out if you have any questions, thoughts, comments. We look forward to seeing you. If you're going to make it this spring to the Cornerstone Members Weekend, happy training.